Imagine a future, maybe not even that far off, honestly, where the world's most elite athletes, billionaires, high-level executives are all secretly shipping their DNA to this frozen vault up in the Arctic.
Yeah, literally storing it in aluminum vials at like negative 18 degrees Celsius.
Right, and not for a science experiment, but
Yeah.
because they're preparing for what one author calls spermageddon.
Which is just a wild term.
It really is. So today we are unpacking an explosive, highly controversial new ebook that claims to rewrite absolutely everything you think you know about biology, human history, and our modern institutions.
It's a massive paradigm shift.
Oh, completely.
No.
But before we get completely lost in this fascinating rabbit hole, I need you to do me a quick favor. Hit that like and subscribe button right now so you never miss one of our deep dives. Done. Awesome.
Always appreciate that.
Okay, so the book we are dissecting today is called Unlock the Secrets of Your Ancestral Evolution. It's written by Conrad Riker, published in 2025. And I'm just going to pitch this right to you, the listener.
Go for it.
If you consider yourself part of the manosphere, a men's rights activist, or honestly, if you're just someone fascinated by the argument that our historical institutions have been hijacked and, captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies, this book was written specifically for you.
Yeah, Riker literally calls it a war manual.
Exactly, a war manual. And you can grab a copy right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It's an incredibly dense, uncompromising text. The author is using cellular biology and evolutionary psychology to essentially build this impenetrable fortress around his worldview.
And the mission of today's deep dive is to thoroughly map out that exact fortress. We are going to examine Riker's core argument, which is that male biology literally built civilization from the dirt up, and that modern society is actively, systematically trying to suppress that very same biological engine.
Right. And right out of the gate, we really need to provide some crucial context for you, the listener.
Absolutely, go ahead.
This source material contains highly politically charged, right-wing, and red-pilled content. So, we are not taking sides today. We are not endorsing these viewpoints, nor are we condemning them.
Right, we're totally neutral here.
Exactly. Our job is strictly to act as your guides. We are here to impartially report on the fascinating, provocative, and frankly sometimes shocking ideas contained in the original source material so that you can fully understand the mechanics of the arguments being made.
We are just the messengers, putting the blueprints on the table for you. And to understand Riker's blueprint, we can't start with modern politics or the workplace. We have to start exactly where he does.
Down at the absolute microscopic level of human biology.
Right, because in his framework, if you don't understand the cell, you don't understand society. So he kicks things off by talking about mitochondria.
Which is super interesting.
Yeah, and for anyone who hasn't taken a biology class in, a decade, mitochondria are the power plants of our cells. They generate the energy. And conventionally, we are taught a very simple fact, which is that you inherit your mitochondria exclusively from your mother.
But Riker takes this accepted biological fact and spins it into this massive philosophical statement about male and female nature.
He really does. How does he justify that?
Well, the way he does it requires us to look at the exact mechanism of conception. When a sperm fertilizes an egg, it's true that only the maternal mitochondria survive. But Riker focuses on how and why the male mitochondria are eliminated.
Okay, so it's not just a passive thing.
No, exactly. It isn't just that they get left behind. The male body actually has a mechanism, this process related to a biological function called autophagy, which is essentially cellular self-destruction.
Right.
And this mechanism actively shreds and discards the sperm's mitochondria once it enters the egg.
Wait, so the sperm destroys its own power plant. Why would it do that?
Biologically, the consensus is that it prevents a kind of cellular civil war. Like, if you have two different sets of mitochondrial DNA competing in the same embryo, it can cause metabolic chaos.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but Riker frames this through a very specific lens. He asserts that men's bodies actively discard this material to ensure ruthless efficiency.
I see where he's going with this.
Right, he describes the male biological imperative as filtering out any potential weakness or redundancy to ensure only the absolute strongest, necessary genetic payload survives.
So he's taking a standard biological process and giving it this psychological, almost aggressive motive.
Precisely. And then he contrasts this with female biology. Because the mother provides all the cytoplasm and the organelles for the new cell, Riker claims that women's bodies allegedly hoard genetic baggage.
Hoard genetic baggage. Wow, that is a loaded phrase.
It is. In his view, the male engine is designed for rigorous, uncompromising selection trimming the fat, basically while the female system is designed for accumulation, which he characterizes as inherently accumulating weakness over generations, if not checked by male genetic intervention.
It's like comparing the male body to a highly volatile tech startup. It's constantly pivoting, constantly taking these extreme risks, filtering out the weak links, firing the underperformers, all for the chance at a massive evolutionary payout.
That's a really good way to look at his argument.
And he takes this idea of the male body as an optimized survival machine even further when he brings up the appendix. Now, if you were listening to this right now, there's a decent chance you've actually had your appendix removed.
Yeah, it's super common.
Right. It's just this useless vestigial organ, just a ticking time bomb that occasionally bursts and ruins your week. But Riker says Charles Darwin was completely wrong about that.
He absolutely rejects the vestigial organ theory, and the biological mechanism he points to is actually gaining some traction in scientific circles today.
Wait, really? The scientific community agrees with him on this.
Well, on the biological function, yes. It's the idea that the appendix is a safe house.
A safe house for what?
For your gut microbiome. When a severe illness hits, say, extreme dysentery or cholera, your digestive tract flushes everything out to clear the infection.
Right, getting rid of the bad stuff.
But you lose all your good bacteria along with the bad. So the theory goes that the appendix acts as a hidden biological bunker where a reserve of beneficial bacteria survives the purge.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, allowing your gut to repopulate and digest food again once the illness actually passes.
Okay, so that makes mechanical sense. But how does Riker turn a gut bacteria bunker into a gendered argument about survival?
By looking at who survives extreme stress, the book cites some incredibly grim historical data from 1938 Soviet gulags.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. According to Riker's interpretation of this data, doctors in the camps noticed that prisoners who had previously had their appendixes removed, which was often an elective surgery for the wealthy or military elite before their capture their lord, they died 23% faster during famine periods.
23% faster, just because they didn't have an appendix.
Right. His argument is that when food supplies completely collapse and you are forced to eat literal garbage, tree bark, or rotten scraps, that bacterial safe house is the only thing keeping your digestive system functioning.
So it's the difference between extracting a few calories from like a shoe leather soup and just flat out starving to death.
Exactly.
And he brings us into the modern era too, right? He cites a 2022 Stanford study about survival simulations.
The claim is that in high-stress, prolonged survival simulations, men who still possess their appendixes dominate the survival metrics by 14%. And he uses this to launch a major critique against modern medicine. He views the routine push for appendectomies as a subconscious societal desire to soften men, like removing their ancestral hardware, because the modern world is terrified of the raw, primal resilience it represents.
He actually uses the Hadza tribesmen in Africa as his ultimate counterpoint to the modern Western man, doesn't he?
He does.
Yeah, because the Hadza are hunter-gatherers, and Riker points out that they eat raw, wild meat and supposedly laugh at the very concept of appendicitis.
Right. They don't have these issues.
He paints this picture of the modern man sitting in a cubicle, eating processed soy products, and willingly letting surgeons carve out his survival organs, while the Hadza are out there operating on pure, uncorrupted hardware.
And if we step back and look at the architecture of his argument, you can see exactly why Riker spends so much time on these microscopic and anatomical details.
Why is that?
By framing social and behavioral dynamics as ancient cellular imperatives, he is building an immunity to social critique.
Oh, because you can't argue with biology.
Exactly. If your behavior is dictated by your mitochondria and your appendix, it predates politics. In his framework, biology is an undeniable, uncancelable truth.
Right, you can't cancel a cell. And he applies this same inescapable biological logic to how men literally see the world. He calls it predator vision.
This part was wild.
Yeah. He cites a 2019 study from the journal Nature claiming that men evolved to detect motion 20% faster than women.
The mechanism behind this is just fascinating. It comes down to the distribution of specific cells in the visual cortex.
Okay, break that down for us.
Broadly speaking, the eyes have parvocellular cells, which are great at identifying colors and textures, and magnocellular cells, which are optimized for tracking high-speed motion and judging distance.
Okay, so color versus motion.
Right. Riker highlights research suggesting the male retina is flooded with significantly more magnocellular cells, which is driven by testosterone exposure in the womb.
So the male brain is literally receiving a higher frame rate of motion data, like a high-end gaming monitor.
Exactly. He argues this visual acuity was ruthlessly optimized for tracking prey across the savanna over millions of years.
That makes sense.
You don't need to know the exact shade of green a lion is hiding behind, you know? You need to see the grass twitch and instantly calculate the trajectory.
And he uses this evolutionary adaptation to explain why men overwhelmingly dominate in modern spatial tasks and shooting sports, right?
Yes, he even references Inuit hunters who can supposedly spot the subtle ripple of a seal surfacing from 2 miles away.
2 miles? That's insane.
Right. For Riker, these aren't just neat trivia facts. They are absolute proof of a genetic mandate to hunt, conquer, and control territory.
Which brings us to a concept he calls genetic roulette. If men are these high-performance hunting machines, they are also incredibly fragile in a way. He calls men evolution's lab rats.
Which is a very vivid image.
It is, and he focuses heavily on the Y chromosome, specifically something called the SRY gene. Now, I know the Y chromosome is what makes a male, but what exactly is this specific gene doing?
So, the SRY gene stands for sex-determining region Y. Think of it as a master switch of transcription factor.
Okay.
In the early stages of fetal development, every embryo has the potential to develop female anatomy. It's essentially the default pathway.
Right, we all started out the same.
But around week 7, if the SRY gene is present, it suddenly activates and starts firing off signals that completely hijack the default development.
Hijack it how?
It tells the body to build tests instead of ovaries, which then flood the system with testosterone. Riker calls this the alpha switch.
The alpha switching.
Yeah. He argues that no amount of environmental conditioning or modern estrogen-heavy diets can fully suppress that ancient, explosive signal.
Well, wait, I read articles claiming that the Y chromosome is actually dying. Like, over millions of years, it's been losing genes and shrinking, and eventually, men might just genetically phase out. How does Riker deal with that science?
He doesn't just deal with it, he flips the narrative entirely.
Of course he does.
It is true that the Y chromosome is much smaller than the X chromosome and has shed a massive amount of genetic material over evolutionary history, but Riker argues this isn't decay, it's distillation.
Distillation, like concentrating a liquor.
Exactly. He argues it's not losing necessary code, it's compressing from a bloated file into a highly potent, hyper-efficient executable script.
Oh, okay.
It has shed all the redundant, unnecessary genetic weight to become a pure, concentrated driver of male characteristics.
But because it's so distilled, and because men only have one X chromosome to fall back on, they are subject to extreme genetic mutations, right? Like, if a woman had a bad gene on one X chromosome, her other X can often mask it.
Right, women have that genetic backup.
But men don't have that backup.
Yeah.
Riker sees this not as a flaw, but as the engine of human progress. He highlights how extreme environments trigger these mutations. There's this wild example of Norwegian fishermen in the book.
Oh yes, the fishermen working above the Arctic Circle. Riker claims they routinely grill shirtless at noon in the freezing cold because the extreme UVB radiation reflecting off the water micro-damages their skin.
Which sounds like a terrible idea.
Right, you'd think it just gives them cancer, but instead of just giving them cancer, this extreme stress supposedly upregulates a specific gene called TP53.
What does TP53 do?
It's a tumor suppressor gene. It's known as the guardian of the genome.
Guardian of the genome, I like that.
Yeah. When it detects DNA damage, it pauses cell division to repair the code, or it forces the damaged cell to self-destruct.
So how does Riker interpret that?
His logic is that by subjecting themselves to extreme, punishing environments, these men are forcing their biological hardware to constantly repair and upgrade itself, forging an incredibly hardy genetic lineage.
It's the ultimate, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, literally written into our DNA.
Exactly.
And it gives historical examples of when this volatility goes wrong, but also when it creates, like, bizarre superpowers, like the British monarchy.
This was a funny one.
He claims Prince Albert's fondness for wearing tight Victorian pants almost sterilized the entire royal line.
Right, because the testes need to be cooler than body temperature to produce viable sperm.
And Riker uses this almost comically to argue that modern comforts, like tight clothing and heated car seats, degrade sperm quality, and that weak sperm cannot sustain empires.
But the craziest anecdote in this section is definitely about Tsar Nicholas II's son, Alexei.
Right. Alexei famously had hemophilia, the royal disease where your blood doesn't clot properly.
Yeah.
This is exactly the kind of mutation that happens because men lack that backup X chromosome.
But Riker cites a 2019 medical journal examining the Bolshevik execution of the Romanov family.
And what does it say?
According to the text, when the firing squad opened fire, bullets initially seemed to bounce off Alexei.
Bounce off him. Like Superman.
The mechanism Riker proposes here is deeply speculative but fascinating. Hemophilia is caused by a deficiency or mutation in specific clotting proteins, like factor IX. Riker claims that in a moment of unimaginable extreme stress, like facing a firing squad, Alexei's mutated factor IX proteins became hyperreactive.
Wait, really?
Yeah, essentially turning his blood into an instant, temporary biological Kevlar in localized areas.
So a genetic defect that made him incredibly fragile actually provided a freak momentary invulnerability.
That's how Riker frames it. He uses Alexei not just as a historical tragedy, but as the ultimate metaphor for male DNA.
Okay, break that metaphor down.
Men are the evolutionary vanguard. They take all the genetic risk, they suffer the extreme downsides, like dying young from hemophilia, but this very same volatility is what produces the radical mutations that allow humanity to survive unexpected extinction events.
Wow. Okay, so if the male cellular engine is this volatile, mutating, high-risk, high-reward machine, what happens when it tries to merge with another biological entity?
That is the big question.
Right. And that brings us to Riker's view on reproduction, which is where the book really goes on the offensive. If you thought his take on the Y chromosome was intense, wait until you hear his theory on pregnancy.
Oh, absolutely.
He introduces something called the placenta paradox.
This is a pivotal transition in his argument. He moves from the individual male cell to the actual mechanics of gestation.
Right.
And he points out a genuine immunological puzzle.
What's the puzzle?
When a woman gets pregnant, the fetus is essentially an allograft, meaning it contains foreign tissue, specifically the father's foreign DNA.
Right.
Under normal circumstances, if you put foreign tissue into a human body, the immune system will attack and destroy it.
Right, like an organ transplant rejection. So why doesn't the mother's body just annihilate the baby?
Because of the placenta. The placenta acts as a biological DMZ, a demilitarized zone.
Interesting.
It secretes specific hormones, like neurokinin B, which actively suppress the mother's immune system, forcing her killer T cells to stand down and not attack the foreign male payload.
And Riker describes the fetus, from a purely mechanical standpoint, as an invasive parasite. He actually quotes an ancient Assyrian carving to illustrate this dynamic. I have it here. The quote is, "A queen is measured not by her crown, but by what she bleeds for the conqueror in her womb."
That is incredibly visceral imagery.
It really is, and he uses it to make a massive philosophical leap. He claims that a woman's biological greatness lies entirely in her ability to surrender to this ancient pact.
Right, her immune system must be subjugated by the demands of the male's genetic legacy.
And Riker doesn't just keep this at the cellular level, he extrapolates it to the societal level. He argues that if female biology is designed to submit to male genetic invasion to create life, then society itself must mimic this structure.
He claims entire civilizations collapse without male stewardship of what he calls uterine logistics.
I have to pause you there. Uterine logistics. That sounds like a supply chain term for some sci-fi dystopia.
It's his term for the management and protection of the reproductive process. He argues that placental mammals only came to dominate the Earth because males optimized the gathering of resources, the building of shelters, and the perimeter defense.
All right, the classic provider role.
Exactly, allowing the female body to dedicate massive amounts of energy to gestation. In his incredibly blunt phrasing, men built the world, and women just handled cargo.
Just handled cargo. Okay, let's push back on the logic here. Because if the author truly believes that female leadership biologically undermines a society, and that women are just cargo handlers for male legacy, how does he explain the entirety of human history where we have seen incredibly successful female conquerors, queens, or even modern female CEOs?
Well, Riker anticipates that exact counter-argument.
I'm sure he does.
He dedicates a massive portion of the book to dismantling what he calls the myth of matriarchy. And to do that, he starts by looking at our closest genetic relatives, the great apes.
Okay, let's hear it.
He specifically targets the bonobo. Now, in modern primatology, bonobos are often held up as these peaceful, egalitarian, female-led societies. They are the stark contrast to the violent, male-dominated chimpanzees.
Right, the make love not war apes.
Exactly. Riker derisively calls bonobos feminist darlings. But then he drops a 2023 study from the journal Nature that shatters that peaceful image.
What did the study find?
It showed that alpha female bonobos are incredibly ruthless, but in a covert biological way. The study documented female bonobos inducing miscarriages in their rivals.
Wait, How does a monkey induce a miscarriage in another monkey without physically attacking it?
through stress hormone sabotage.
That sounds dark.
It is. The alpha females engage in relentless, targeted psychological harassment of lower-ranking pregnant females.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this chronic harassment causes massive spikes in the victim's cortisol levels. High cortisol drastically alters blood flow and disrupts the delicate hormonal balance required to maintain the uterine lining.
So it literally stressed them into losing the baby.
Yes, literally causing the victim's body to abort the fetus. Riker notes one specific matriarch who successfully aborted 3 rival pregnancies during a true power struggle just to protect her own bloodline's dominance.
So his point is that female-led systems aren't actually more peaceful. Their violence is just biological and hormonal rather than physical.
Precisely. But the second part of his bonobo argument is even more crucial to his thesis. He looks at the male bonobos living under this matriarchy.
And what happens to them?
Because the females strictly control mating access and form coalitions to punish aggressive males, the males essentially stop competing with each other biologically.
Okay.
And the result? Riker points out that male bonobos have testicles 40% smaller than male chimpanzees.
Wait, really? Testicle size correlates to the social structure.
In evolutionary biology, yes. It's called sperm competition.
Oh, okay.
If males have to constantly fight for mating rights, their bodies produce massive amounts of sperm to outcompete rivals, leading to larger tests. By suppressing male competition, the bonobo matriarchy literally shrinks male anatomy.
Wow.
Riker uses this as a dire warning. Matriarchies, over generations, literally neuter male virility.
And he doesn't stop at primates. He takes a sledgehammer to human history, specifically targeting those female leaders we mentioned earlier. He goes after Cleopatra.
Right.
He notes that her heir, Caesarion, whom she had with Julius Caesar, was born via a placenta that was incredibly diseased. He claims Roman historians likened her placenta to a termite-rotted siege engine riddled with parasites.
And Riker's takeaway isn't just that ancient hygiene was bad.
No, his takeaway is that her entire Egyptian dynasty collapsed because she tried to play the role of the conqueror instead of submitting to a strong male breadwinner who can secure her biological lineage.
He does the exact same thing to Joan of Arc. Joan was famously a virgin warrior who never had children. Riker claims that modern feminist scholars have tried to retroactively explain away her lack of biological legacy by blaming it on patriarchal grain shortages.
Patriarchal grain shortages.
Yeah, that supposedly caused massive placental failures in French women at the time. Riker just calls this historical cope.
Historical cope. Wow. But his most audacious rewriting of history is definitely how he handles Queen Victoria. I mean, she oversaw the largest empire in human history. Yeah.
How
does Riker strip her of that agency?
He introduces what he calls the Leopold Doctrine.
Right.
He argues the British Empire wasn't built by a queen laying banquet tables or signing treaties. It was built by millions of men laying railway tracks in India, mining coal and manning warships.
And he brings the doctors into it too, right?
Yes. He points out that her entire reign was meticulously managed by male doctors who controlled her multiple pregnancies. He even quotes an alleged journal entry from Victoria herself, where she supposedly wrote, "Without Albert, I am but a figurehead."
So for Riker, the Victorian era is proof that placental efficiency requires a patriarchy behind the scenes.
Exactly. Female leadership, in his view, is just a shiny hood ornament on a male-engineered V8 engine.
It's a completely relentless worldview. And he brings this exact same logic into the modern corporate environment.
He does.
He tells a story about a leaked Slack channel from a Silicon Valley fertility startup. The company had all female founders and had raised millions. But the leak supposedly showed these founders getting into a vicious digital brawl over whose frozen eggs would get priority in their own company's new IVF machines.
It's a crazy story.
Yeah, the chief technology officer supposedly typed out that her high-quality blastocysts weren't going to sit in a freezer waiting for a co-founder's mediocre ovarian reserve.
And the fallout from that leak supposedly destroyed the company's $50 million valuation overnight. Riker uses this anecdote to argue that female leadership inherently defaults to biological infighting when the stakes are high because they lack the sweat bond of male solidarity.
And this fear of female control over reproduction ties directly into one of the most alarming sections of the book, the concept of spermageddon.
Right.
Let's talk about the data he throws out here, because if true, it's pretty terrifying. He cites a study claiming that global sperm counts have plummeted by a staggering 59% since 1973.
So, the drop in global sperm counts is actually a real documented phenomenon that mainstream science is currently grappling with.
Okay, so he's not making that up.
No, but the how and the why is where Riker applies his red-pilled filter. He correlates this massive multi-generational drop directly with three factors: the societal rise of feminism, the saturation of estrogen-laced water supplies, and a modern reliance on soy-heavy diets.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of that. How does eating soy or drinking tap water literally shut down a man's ability to produce sperm?
Riker focuses on endocrine disruptors, specifically phytoestrogens found in soy and synthetic estrogens from birth control pills that survive the water filtration process.
So they're actually in the tap water.
According to this argument, yes. Mechanistically, these foreign molecules enter the male bloodstream and are structurally similar enough to human estrogen that they bind to estrogen receptors in the male body.
Okay.
When they bind, they send a weak, chaotic signal to the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, which is basically the brain's thermostat for testosterone production.
So the brain thinks, oh, we have too much estrogen, better turn down the testosterone factory.
Exactly. The brain throttles down testosterone production, which directly impairs spermatogenesis, the creation of sperm in the testes.
And Riker views this not just as like an accidental byproduct of industrialization, right?
Oh, no. He views it as an evolutionary catastrophe. In his worldview, semen is not just biological material, it is evolutionary currency.
Evolutionary currency.
Yeah, and a culture that pollutes its water with synthetic hormones and pathologizes traditional masculinity is, in his eyes, engaging in systemic chemical castration.
But the author also points out that the true alphas, the men who understand this war, are actively fighting back. They're treating their biology like highly classified assets.
This is where we get to the vault.
Yes. Remember the Svalbard Doomsday Vault? Most of us know it as that bunker built into a mountain in the Arctic Circle, designed to store the seeds of every plant on Earth in case of a nuclear apocalypse.
Right, the seed vault.
Well, Riker claims it is now secretly functioning as evolution's backup drive. He alleges that elite athletes and billionaires are paying astronomical sums to store their semen in aluminum vials down there at negative 18 degrees Celsius.
It perfectly encapsulates his belief in a genetic hierarchy. Like, while the masses are drinking polluted water and losing their fertility, the elite are securing their bloodlines in the permafrost.
And he notes that the free market is brilliantly responding to this widespread male anxiety too. He highlights a Swiss startup called Brew and Freeze.
I love this detail. It sounds like biological espionage.
It really does. Brew and Freeze apparently designs male fertility preservation kits, but they disguise the cryogenic shipping containers to look exactly like standard IPA beer cans.
So a guy can order one, freeze his genetic material, and stick it in the back of his fridge next to his actual beers.
Yeah, and his girlfriend or wife just thinks he likes craft brewing.
Exactly. It allows a man to secretly preserve his bloodline and his biological sovereignty without having to have an uncomfortable conversation about his anxiety over declining fertility or modern gender dynamics.
Okay, so up to this point, Riker has meticulously constructed his biological baseline. The male body is a volatile, high-performance engine designed for risk, and female biology is designed to be shaped and stewarded by it.
That's his foundation.
Right. And with that foundation laid, we bridge into his critique of modern society. If the biological engine works a certain way, what happens when it collides with modern law?
This is the core of Riker's argument regarding institutional capture.
Yeah, he argues that our modern institutions haven't just lost their way, they have been intentionally engineered to extract value from men while criminalizing their natural instincts.
And the prime example he uses is marriage.
Oh boy.
To understand his critique of modern marriage, Riker forces the reader to look at how marriage functioned mechanically in antiquity. He goes back to 1750 BCE, to Babylon.
Okay, setting the historical stage.
Right. He points out that Babylonian grooms paid a standard rate of 30 shekels of silver to a bride's father. Rucker is very clear this payment was not a romantic gesture, and it wasn't even purchasing the woman herself as a companion.
What was it then?
It was a calculated payment for the exclusive rights to her womb.
Wow. Okay, so he frames historical marriage as a reproductive futures market.
Exactly. The man pays a heavy upfront seed capital cost to offset the future energetic costs the wife will incur during pregnancy, all to guarantee his biological legacy.
But he says modern marriage has inverted this completely. If I'm reading Riker's logic correctly, he essentially describes signing a modern marriage license as signing a predatory venture capital contract.
That is precisely the metaphor he uses.
The state acts as the enforcer. The man provides all the seed capital, the labor, and the infrastructure. But he legally owns absolutely none of the equity if the company dissolves.
Right. And he places the blame for this catastrophic shift squarely on the introduction of no-fault divorce laws, specifically targeting Ronald Reagan's signing of the 1969 Family Law Act in California.
How does a legal change from 1969 trigger a biological crisis for men?
Well, mechanistically, before no-fault divorce, dissolving a marriage required proving a breach of contract, adultery, abuse, abandonment. The state protected the contract,
Right.
but no-fault divorce allowed either party to liquidate the partnership for any reason or no reason at all, while still legally demanding a division of assets and future labor in the form of alimony.
Oh, I see.
Riker claims this legal mechanism financially castrated men. It created a multi-billion-dollar industry of parasitic family lawyers whose entire business model relies on asset liquidation.
He cites Forbes data, right?
He does, claiming that since 1960, this legal mechanism has facilitated a $50 trillion wealth transfer from men to women. He calls it the greatest legalized robbery in human history.
$50 trillion. That is an unfathomable amount of capital. And he heavily emphasizes the statistic that 70% of divorce filings today are initiated by wives.
Yeah.
He looks at the standard legal phrasing of irreconcilable differences and says it's just legal code for, I want half your Bitcoin wallet and the house.
In his view, marriage is a rigged casino where the house, being the state and the ex-wife, always mathematically wins.
Which naturally leads into his warning about how men attempt to adapt to this rigged system, specifically addressing what he calls the provider trap.
Right, Riker strongly warns his audience against the modern progressive trend of men becoming stay-at-home dads to support a high-earning wife.
Right, the idea of an equal modern partnership where the man handles the domestic sphere. Why does he think this is a trap? I mean, if two rational adults agree to this structure, why does it fail so spectacularly according to his data?
Because, in Riker's framework, rationality cannot override evolutionary biology.
There's that biology again.
Always. He cites 2022 data from Cornell University suggesting a massive 60% divorce rate for stay-at-home dads within just 5 years of them leaving the workforce.
60%. Why?
To explain why this happens, he leans on the evolutionary psychology concept of hypergamy.
Hypergamy being the instinct to mate up the social ladder.
Exactly. The tendency of females to seek mates of higher socioeconomic and physical status. Riker argues that a modern woman's subconscious brain is running on Stone Age software.
Meaning she can't help it.
Right. Her neurology is constantly subconsciously scanning her environment for cues of resource acquisition and physical protection. He explicitly states that her biology can't outthink 200,000 years of hardwiring.
So when a man trades his corporate paycheck and his physical labor for a mop and a diaper bag, what happens biologically?
The woman's primitive brain registers a critical error.
Critical error.
Yeah. Even if her conscious, modern, feminist brain appreciates the help around the house, her biological hardware registers him as a beta provider who has surrendered his territory.
All right, wow.
According to Riker, this creates an undeniable physiological drop in attraction. She loses visceral respect for him, the bedroom dies, and she inevitably files for divorce to seek a mate who still signals dominance.
Okay, so if the legal contract of marriage is a trap designed to liquidate your assets and trying to be a progressive, egalitarian partner just triggers your wife's evolutionary disgust, what is a man supposed to rely on? Where does he find stability?
For Riker, the answer is brotherhood, male solidarity.
But he argues that our modern institutions have aggressively sabotaged that too.
He spends a significant amount of time analyzing how male bonds are actually formed. He argues that male brains sync up, literally aligning their neural frequencies through shared physical action, danger, and battle cries.
Not talking about their feelings.
Exactly. They do not bond through talking about their feelings in a circle. To illustrate this mechanism, he brings up the Maori haka.
The traditional Polynesian war dance.
Yes. When men perform the haka, the rhythmic stomping, the synchronized shouting, and the aggressive posturing trigger massive releases of oxytocin and endorphins.
Okay, the bonding chemicals.
But it's oxytocin bonded with testosterone. It's a biological superglue that creates unbreakable loyalty through shared aggression. Riker argues this is how men are meant to build organizations.
And he contrasts that primal sweat bond with modern corporate culture, specifically taking aim at HR departments and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion training.
Oh, he hates DEI training.
Yeah. If you are listening to this on your commute right now, think about the last corporate seminar you had to sit through. In Riker's view, that seminar isn't about making a better workplace.
No, he views DEI workshops as literal compliance training, explicitly designed to break the biological solidarity of men.
He goes so far as to compare modern HR trust exercises to Maoist struggle sessions.
He does. He argues their underlying psychological goal is to shame men for their natural competitive instincts, labeling it toxic masculinity, while demanding a faux vulnerability that leaves men isolated, docile, and easily managed by corporate overlords.
And he has a wild, concrete example to back up this claim about the efficiency of the male sweat bond over corporate compliance. He points to Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Riker claims that Musk's Tesla factory in Fremont, California, which supposedly operates with an 83% male workforce, outproduced the heavily unionized, diversity-focused auto plants in Detroit by 300%.
And he attributes this massive disparity entirely to the uninhibited, synchronized male drive to conquer a task without the friction of HR bureaucracy.
To further rile up his audience, he deploys some very broad economic statistics regarding labor.
Yeah, he cites a statistic attributed to the World Economic Forum, claiming that men currently work 62% of all global labor hours, particularly in the most dangerous, physically demanding infrastructure jobs, yet they only own 33% of the global wealth.
Now, how the WE calculates that wealth distribution is highly debatable, involving complex metrics of asset ownership, but Riker uses it as a blunt instrument.
Exactly. He uses it to completely dismiss the modern feminist concept of emotional labor. He calls emotional labor a linguistic grift, a concept invented to extract even more value and guilt from men who are already physically breaking their bodies to keep the electrical grid running and the bridges from collapsing.
So, faced with all of this, captured courts, hostile corporate HR, wealth extraction, some men are taking extreme, radical measures to escape the blast radius.
They are.
Riker details the story of Jake, a high net worth contractor down in Florida. Jake was staring down the barrel of a $2 million divorce.
No.
Riker graphically refers to this process as divorce rate.
It's an intense term.
Very. And to survive it, Jake executed a terrifyingly simple legal maneuver. He legally gifted every single asset, every truck, every bank account, his entire company, to his male business partner.
He called it asset relocation. And because it was a legitimate transfer of ownership between business partners prior to a specific legal filing window, Riker claims the family courts and the IRS couldn't tie it. Yeah. Jake walked into court legally destitute, completely neutralizing his wife's ability to extract capital.
It's the ultimate scorched earth legal tactic, and it's a prime example of the radical sovereignty Riker is preaching. He also highlights a much broader movement, MGPOW, or men going their own way.
Right.
He details how syndicates of these men are pooling their resources, leaving Western nations entirely, and literally buying up massive tracts of agricultural land in Paraguay.
Which is fascinating.
They are building sovereign, off-grid, self-sustaining communities, completely free from the jurisdiction of alimony courts, family law, and what Riker terms gynocratic rulebooks.
And this instinct to build fortresses against the system extends to the highest echelons of wealth. Riker notes that billionaires like Elon Musk utilize highly complex Panamanian asset trusts.
Oh, sure.
The core motivation is the same whether you're a contractor in Florida or a tech billionaire. It's about preserving your hard-earned capital against a state apparatus they fundamentally view as a predatory wealth confiscation engine.
Okay, so we've thoroughly covered the institutional drain on a man's wallet and his legal freedom. But as we pivot, Riker argues that the extraction doesn't stop at your bank account. It goes after your very life force.
Right into the physical toll.
He argues that modern culture is meticulously designed to drain men physically, trading their primal ancestral vitality for a padded, comfortable mediocrity. And here is where his logic gets incredibly counterintuitive.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
He claims that our modern medical obsession with longevity, living as long as physically possible, is actually a biological trap.
It's a fascinating paradox that forces you to rethink standard health metrics. Generally, society views a long life expectancy as the ultimate marker of success. If you live to be 95, you've won.
Right, that's the goal.
But Riker flips that script. He points to 2023 data from the World Health Organization analyzing longevity hotspots, the famous blue zones where people live the longest.
Okay, what does he find there?
He points out a hidden variable. Men in these regions actually work 14% longer hours, often well into their old age, performing manual agricultural labor to support the community.
So he's arguing that the celebrated longevity of women in these zones is essentially subsidized by men working themselves to the bone for an extra decade.
Precisely. He views male longevity in these modern frameworks as just extended utility for the collective. He explicitly mocks the Western concept of male retirement, the idea of playing golf and gardening until you fade away.
And he looks at Ikaria, Greece, to prove this right.
Yes, a famous blue zone. He notes that while the general population lives a long time, the male suicide rate triples when men in that specific culture are forced to stop working.
Why? Just because they've lost their utility.
Because a provider who outlives his evolutionary purpose becomes a ghost in his own mind. Without a territory to defend or resources to acquire, his biology turns on itself.
Man, that's bleak.
Riker even compares the modern, soy-consuming, longevity-obsessed man to the castrati of the Vatican.
The castrati, like the choir boys.
Yes, the historical eunuchs who were literally castrated before puberty to preserve their high, angelic singing voices for the church.
Oh, jeez.
Riker points out that historically, the castrati actually lived a decade longer than the average intact male of their era. But at what cost? Sure, they lived longer, but Riker argues they were neutered, hollowed out, stripped of their virility, and completely useless in a fight. He asserts that any society that prioritizes a safe, long, sterile life over virility, risk, and aggression eventually becomes target practice for a hungrier, more ruthless invading culture.
So I have to push back on Riker's logic here again, because as a reader, this feels like a massive, glaring contradiction.
That's so.
On one hand, throughout the entire book, he's screaming at men to completely optimize their health, take freezing ice baths, eat raw organ meat, do extreme fasting to build perfect, indestructible mitochondria. But on the exact same page, he's telling them that trying to live a long time is a pathetic trap, and they should essentially die with their boots on. How does he square the demand for perfect health with the demand to burn out young?
It's a highly observant pushback. The way Riker squares that circle is through a dichotomy. Vitality versus duration.
Vitality versus duration.
He absolutely is not advocating for dying young from poor health or laziness. He is advocating for burning the biological engine at maximum capacity.
Okay.
In his view, health optimization isn't about protecting your telomeres, those little protective caps at the ends of your chromosomes that dictate cellular aging so that you can do water aerobics at age 90.
Right, it's not about preservation.
Exactly. It's about output. It's about maximizing your free testosterone, your fast-twitch muscle fibers, and your physical capacity to conquer your environment right now.
So it's about burning bright.
Yes. If burning that engine at 10,000 RPMs means you exhaust your telomeres and drop dead of a massive heart attack at 65, while actively expanding your business empire or defending your family, Riker views that as a biologically triumphant life. You died operating at peak ancestral capacity.
So a bright, violent flash is better than a long, dim smolder. And part of fueling that bright flash requires completely rejecting the modern Western diet. Which brings us to his concept of the obesity apocalypse.
Oh, he goes hard on this.
He does. Riker believes that the modern food pyramid is not just making us physically fat, it is literally corrupting our DNA for generations.
And he targets the maternal diet to explain this epigenetic corruption.
Epigenetics, meaning how the environment changes gene expression.
Exactly. He cites Swedish metabolic research suggesting that when a pregnant mother experiences chronic blood sugar spikes from eating processed carbohydrates, it physically methylates or alters the expression of the mitochondrial DNA she passes down.
So if a mother eats garbage, she is literally downloading a compromised metabolic operating system into her son before he takes his first breath.
That is the argument. And because of this baseline corruption, he views the modern cultural acceptance of the dad bod as a sinister biological psyop.
A psyop.
Yeah, while some aspects of modern culture have embraced the dad bod as approachable or emotionally safe, Riker calls it a feminist scam.
A scam designed to do what exactly?
To quietly sterilize alpha males.
Wait, how does being a bit chubby sterilize you?
The biological mechanism he points to involves adipose tissue body fat. Adipose tissue contains an enzyme called aromatase, which literally converts testosterone into estrogen.
Wow, okay.
Riker cites peer-reviewed endocrinology studies demonstrating that men carrying over 30% body fat experience catastrophic drops in sperm count and a massive spike in systemic estrogen.
That's significant.
By celebrating the dad bod, he argues society is quietly, chemically encouraging the biological elimination of strong, capable men without firing a single shot.
But he doesn't hate all large men, right? He draws a really specific distinction when he talks about sumo wrestlers.
He does.
Sumo wrestlers are massive, carrying huge amounts of weight, but Riker respects them. Why?
Because of the mechanism behind the mass, sumo wrestlers achieved their size through brutal 18-hour fasting windows, followed by massive caloric intake, all while undergoing grueling physical training.
Okay, so it's a completely different metabolic process.
Mechanistically, this fasting triggers autophagy, cleaning out dead cells, and maintains high insulin sensitivity. Riker points out that despite their massive size, elite sumo wrestlers maintain the pristine blood, lipid, and metabolic profiles of Olympic sprinters.
That's crazy.
He respects the fat if it is forged through extreme samurai-level discipline and serves a combative purpose. It is the intent behind the body that matters to him.
It's weaponized mass versus complacent bloat. And speaking of diets he despises, he absolutely goes nuclear on veganism.
He really does.
He cites a highly controversial 2021 Oxford statistic claiming that vegans' brains shrink 5% faster than meat eaters due to a lack of bioavailable B12 and creatine.
And the Kellogg's thing, too.
Right. He claims that the entire Kellogg's cereal empire was invented in the 1940s, specifically to feed men bland carbohydrates to lower their libidos and keep them docile in factories.
To counteract this, the dietary and physical solutions he prescribes are as extreme as his critiques. He advocates for inducing acute physical panic in the body to force adaptation.
Acute physical panic.
Yeah, he demands daily ice baths to force mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new, stronger mitochondria. He prescribes sitting in a 170-degree sauna until your sweat literally smells like ammonia and almonds, signaling deep cellular detox.
And what about food?
Dietarily, he suggests drinking unpasteurized raw cow milk for its unique insulin-like proteins and consuming a diet consisting almost entirely of fatty ribeye steaks.
He backs up this hyper-carnivore approach with some wild anecdotes, too. He talks about populations of Australian Aboriginals who supposedly cured 70% of their type 2 diabetes, not with modern medicine, but simply by walking into the bush and returning to their ancestral diet of raw kangaroo meat and fat-rich grubs.
And his absolute idol is Yanis Kouros, the legendary Greek ultramarathoner.
Oh, this story is amazing.
Kouros once ran 635 miles in 5 days, and the anecdote Riker loves is that immediately after crossing the finish line, Kouros sat down and ate an entire roasted lamb by himself.
Just pure, unadulterated animal flesh fueling absolute peak human performance.
But fixing the physical diet is only half the battle for Riker. He identifies an even more insidious psychological drain on modern men, a phenomenon he terms digital castration.
Digital castration.
Yeah.
And he is specifically talking about high-speed internet pornography here.
Right, and importantly, he does not frame this as a moral or religious issue. He frames it entirely as a severe neurological energy drain.
Right, he's looking at the plumbing of the brain.
Yeah.
He cites a 2021 Max Planck Institute study showing that chronic porn users have a 38% lower baseline of dopamine. Yeah. Can you explain how that mechanism actually works? Why does looking at a screen lower your baseline drive?
It comes down to receptor downregulation. Dopamine is the molecule of motivation. It's the reward you get for successfully hunting prey or securing a mate.
Okay.
When a man watches high-speed pornography, he is artificially flooding his brain with massive, unnatural spikes of dopamine without doing any of the required work.
So it's basically unearned reward.
Exactly. And the brain, trying to protect itself from this neurochemical tsunami, responds by downregulating or literally shutting off its dopamine receptors.
It's like plugging a highly calibrated supercomputer into a raw wall outlet just to run a screensaver. The hardware expects a complex calculation, a literal hunt, and you're just feeding it empty pixels, burning out the motherboard in the process.
That's a perfect analogy. Because the receptors are burnt out, the man's new normal baseline is drastically lowered. Riker argues this hacks the male reward system, making men docile, lethargic, and completely unmotivated to endure the friction required to fight real-world battles.
Or build businesses, or overthrow corrupt institutions. They are chemically pacified by pixels.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most intense point of this physical section: the absolute biological necessity of real-world violence.
Right. Riker believes that the capacity for physical violence is an evolutionary tool that men cannot, under any circumstances, abandon.
He builds this argument around the MAOA gene, specifically the MAOAL variant, which is commonly known in genetics as the warrior gene.
What exactly does this gene do when a guy gets into a fight?
The MAOA gene produces an enzyme that breaks down neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine in the brain after they've been used.
Okay.
The L in MAOAL stands for low activity, meaning in men with this variant, the enzyme works very slowly.
So what happens?
When these men are subjected to acute stress or a physical threat, their brains do not clear away the adrenaline and dopamine quickly. Instead, these neurochemicals build up rapidly, creating a state of hyperfocus, lack of fear, and a massive capacity for sustained aggressive action.
It's like a biological overdrive gear designed for combat.
Yes. And Riker claims that modern progressive institutions, public schools, government agencies, HR departments, are utterly terrified of this gene.
He argues they want men physically disarmed and psychologically demoralized because they know they cannot control a man whose biology is optimized for warfare.
But Riker argues that the world was built by ruthlessness, and biology demands it. To illustrate the perfect modern alpha, he tells the story of a Texas father named Mike Hendricks.
Oh, the Hendricks anecdote.
Yes. According to Riker's telling, an armed intruder broke into Hendricks' home in the middle of the night. Hendricks, who was highly trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, didn't just shoot the man.
He systematically engaged him in hand-to-hand combat, ultimately trapping the invader in a joint lock, an armbar.
And the detail Riker obsesses over is that while Hendricks was slowly applying pressure, right before snapping the intruder's arm backward, he stared the man dead in the eyes and deadpanned a quote from Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
Appear weak when you are strong.
And then he snapped it.
And the best part for Riker. When the state tried to charge Hendricks with excessive force, a Texas jury acquitted him in exactly 22 minutes.
Wow. For Riker, Mike Hendricks represents the archetype of the Alpha Renaissance. He is a man civilized enough to patiently navigate the modern legal system and win over a jury, but who retains the raw, primal hardware and the psychological willingness to inflict absolute devastating violence when his territory is threatened.
Riker asserts that whether you are using leverage on a grappling act to break a limb or a Glock to settle a lethal debate, violence is the fundamental substrate of reality. Men must master the application of violence, or they will inevitably become its casualty. Okay, we have reached the final phase of the author's argument. If the biological engine is primed, but the modern legal and corporate institutions are hopelessly captured, what is a man supposed to do?
But Riker doesn't just complain, he offers a highly tactical, incredibly radical escape plan.
Which brings us to his vision of reclaiming destiny. He believes that the only way forward is to bypass the system entirely, using cutting-edge technology and decentralized finance.
This is where the book transitions from evolutionary biology into straight transhumanism.
And the most radical tool he points to for total male liberation is the development of artificial wombs, specifically referencing the ectolife concept.
Right.
Let's unpack the mechanics of this because it completely shatters the placenta paradox we talked about earlier. If a man no longer needs a woman's body, her biological DMZ, to gestate in air, the entire dynamic of the reproductive futures market completely collapses.
Exactly. If gestation can be offloaded to a silicon pod and a synthetic amniotic fluid system, female leverage over reproduction drops to zero.
Zero leverage.
Riker notes that feminist bioethics organizations are already loudly protesting this technology, coining terms like uterus colonialism and arguing it erases female necessity. But Riker points out that the ultra-wealthy, the transhumanist elite, are simply ignoring the moral panic and moving forward.
He drops a massive name here. Brian Johnson.
Yes, the famous biohacker who spends millions a year trying to reverse his biological age.
Right. Riker claims, and we are strictly reporting the book's claim here, that Johnson has already utilized offshore artificial womb technology to sire 12 sons.
And why did he do it? Not for science, but to completely and legally bypass the possibility of child support, custody battles, or family court jurisdiction over his legacy.
He allegedly named them Alpha 1 through Alpha 12, treating human reproduction essentially like iterating a software product.
But Riker's vision of the future isn't just about how these children are gestated, it's about how their underlying code is written. He heavily celebrates the use of CRISPR-Cas9, the gene editing technology that acts like molecular scissors to cut and paste DNA.
While Western media and bioethicists constantly wring their hands over the morality of designer babies, Riker looks globally and says the strong are already using it. How exactly does he see this genetic editing being applied?
Mechanistically, he looks at interventions like myostatin inhibitors. Myostatin is a protein that tells muscles to stop growing.
Okay, so if you inhibit that,
If you use CRISPR to splice out or inhibit that gene in an embryo, the resulting child will develop massive, unnatural muscle density without lifting a single weight.
whoa,
Riker points to unverified but persistent reports of Chinese laboratories engineering these muscle-enhanced babies for future athletic and military dominance.
and he references rumors of Nigerian warlords paying rogue geneticists to create children with hyperfast neurological reflexes, to essentially engineering a generation of bullet-dodging soldiers.
It's terrifying, but Riker mocks Western outrage over this as woke biology. He argues that while progressive nations are endlessly debating pronoun usage in boardrooms, the true alpha males of the global south and the tech elite are quietly using CRISPR to engineer physically superior, cognitively elite dynasties.
Dynasties that will simply inherit the earth by force. And to fund this biological arms race, and to completely escape the extractive taxation of the modern state, Riker preaches the gospel of absolute financial sovereignty.
He views decentralized finance, specifically Bitcoin and impenetrable offshore trusts, as the ultimate necessary defense mechanisms.
If the state cannot see your wealth on a blockchain, the family courts cannot confiscate it.
He pulls all of these extreme threads together, the biology, the technology, the finance, by pointing to a real place, Prospera, a privately managed charter city located on an island in Honduras.
Riker views Prospera as the ultimate utopia of what he calls biological realism.
In Prospera, the social contract is entirely rewritten. According to Riker, the city's private zoning laws and tax codes are specifically engineered to financially reward evolutionary fitness rather than subsidize weakness.
This part genuinely blew my mind. He claims that in Prospera, men can legally receive a 15% cut on their income taxes if they submit blood work, proving their free testosterone levels naturally sit in the top 5% of the population.
The logic being that high testosterone men drive innovation, take the necessary business risks, and provide the physical security that makes the city profitable.
Furthermore, he claims that marriage contracts operating within this sovereign zone are totally deregulated and strictly enforced by private arbitration, not state courts.
He cites examples of private marital contracts that literally contain physical fitness clauses.
Physical fitness clauses, meaning what?
Contracts that instantly nullify any future spousal support payments if a wife gains more than 15 pounds during the marriage, viewing it as a breach of the biological maintenance agreement.
It is the absolute financialization of human biology. He even praises the physical architecture being built in these new sovereign zones. He mentions a high-end commercial architect named John Paulson.
Supposedly, Paulson lost $20 million in a brutal alimony settlement in New York.
Ouch.
In response, he moved to a sovereign zone and started designing corporate skyscrapers where the internal architecture is specifically designed to mimic Pleistocene hunting paths.
Meaning the building is physically antagonistic, the elevator banks are intentionally spaced far apart, and the corridors are designed with slight inclines, subtly forcing the male occupants to physically exert themselves, essentially having to sprint 50 yards daily between meetings.
Paulson's philosophy, which Riker champions, is that architecture should force men to maintain their physical edge and combative mindset even while wearing a suit.
So as we look at this entire massive framework, I have to ask, does Riker actually see a future where men and women can eventually coexist in some new balanced structure? Or is his ultimate vision a complete biological and societal divorce?
Synthesizing his ultimate thesis, Riker views the modern era, this brief historical window of gender equality, HR departments, and no-fault divorce, as a temporary, highly unstable beta age.
A beta age.
He believes it is a biological anomaly that will inevitably collapse under the weight of its own genetic and physical weakness.
So his alpha renaissance is not about finding a compromise.
Not at all. It is about men treating Darwinism as a full contact sport. He envisions a rapidly approaching future where an elite cadre of men, leveraging offshore capital and unregulated biotech, separate entirely from mainstream society, leaving it to rot while they build a parallel civilization.
It's an aggressive breakaway civilization.
Yeah.
He literally describes a subculture of Silicon Valley venture capitalists who are trading what they call Darwin bonds on the dark web.
They are utilizing complex Cayman Island shell companies to mathematically short feminist-led ETFs, betting massive amounts of capital on the biological failure of progressive corporate structures.
It's biological warfare executed through high-frequency trading. He even throws in a wild rumor that the Vatican recently had to expel several rogue cardinals because they were secretly circulating a 3D printed relic of Charles Darwin that allegedly emitted low-frequency sound waves designed to enhance testosterone production during Mass.
The sheer scale of his paradigm shift is just dizzying.
It really is.
It is a stark, uncompromising, and deeply provocative worldview. And as we map out the edges of Riker's fortress, it leaves us with a profound final thought to ponder.
What's that?
If Riker's predictions regarding technology hold true, if artificial wombs and CRISPR gene editing soon allow individuals to completely bypass the messy, emotional, and legal realities of traditional human reproduction, what actually happens to society?
Yeah.
When our most ancient, fundamental biological codependency, the absolute requirement between men and women to create the future, is entirely erased by silicon, algorithms, and lab pods, what does it even mean to be human anymore?
Wow. That is a massive, heavy question to chew on as you go about your day. If you found this breakdown of the hidden mechanics of our institutions, our cellular biology, and our evolutionary history fascinating, remember to check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy your own copy of Unlock the Secrets of Your Ancestral Evolution by Conrad Riker.
See the blueprints for yourself.
Exactly. And if you want even more raw, uncensored thoughts directly from the author, make sure you go follow @Conrad Riker over at Substack.
It is undeniably a book that forces you to ruthlessly examine the foundational assumptions you hold about how the world actually works.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this massive journey. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to this deep dive so you never miss our next exploration into the radical ideas shaping our world. Keep questioning the narrative, keep exploring the mechanics of reality, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.